It's not that I disbelieve the ghost story. It's just, it was baffling. I looked it up and I'm like, well, that's not where she's buried.
There are many things you've been told that are true, told that are true, that are actually false, told that are false, that are actually true. It makes it so that when the important things happen, we don't believe in them. And if you don't believe in the important things when they happen, you're left exposed. And I don't want to be left exposed like that again, so we're not doing that. And that is why today is the day. We are telling the story. I'm pulling off the Band-Aid. This is not easy for me, okay? Because it's one thing for me to just hide and have these experiences and fill notebooks with all of the experiences that I keep having and think, well, someday I'll share, Oh, I'll just write another story. Oh, I'll just do this. Maybe I'll just turn this into a book. Yeah, and that's what I keep doing. And never sharing them like this. Never in the way that I am supposed to. But I recently realized that timing is everything, and this is actually the time. This is the time when all of those stories start coming out. So here we are. That's why we're doing this. I lit a candle, and Eunice Cobb Stocking spoke.
There were 3 drunken maidens come from the Isle of Wight. They drank from Monday morning nor stopped till Saturday night. When Saturday night did come, me boys, they wouldn't then go out. And these 3 drunken maidens, they pushed the jug about. Then up comes bouncing Sally, her cheeks as red as a bloom. Move up, me jolly sisters, and give young Sally some room. For I will be your equal before that we go out. And these 4 drunken maidens, they push the jug about. There's woodcock and pheasant, there's partridge and hare. There's all sorts of the dainties, no scarcity was there. There's 40 quarts of beer, me boys, they barely drunk them out. And these 4 drunken maidens, they push the jug about. Well, then up comes the landlord, he's asking for his pay. It's a 40-pound bill, me boys, these girls are supposed to pay. That's 10 pounds apiece, me boys, they still wouldn't go out. And these 4 drunken maidens, they pushed the jug about. So where are your feathered hats, your mantles rich and fine? They've all been swallowed up, me boys, in tankards of good wine. And where are your maidenheads, you maidens brisk and gay? We left them in the alehouse, we drank them clean away.
Oh, did I think that we would ever be in this position again? No, that's not why I made this costume. I made this costume because I found out a story about my ancestor. During the war, there were only 3 gunpowder mills in the north capable of making this particular kind of gunpowder. It was very fine and it was required for that final spark. Couldn't win a war without that kind of gunpowder. That was part of the early discussions amongst the Sons of Liberty. I'm dressed up as Eunice, and her husband's name was George. George and Eunice had just purchased a property along a creek. They were planning on opening a flour mill. I can't remember if it was George's brother or Eunice's brother. Convinced them instead to open a gunpowder mill. After George and Eunice agreed, they were given this top secret recipe. The recipe was originally held by a war industrialist in Pennsylvania.
October 1774, King George III declared it illegal to send or sell gunpowder here in the American colony. It looks like actually there were a number of little small mills that tried to get going, but their output was never very good because they didn't have access to the 3 simple ingredients that were required to make gunpowder. The output was apparently pretty small, with the exception of this Oswald Eve. Now, Oswald, the account that I read said that Paul Revere went to him and tried to get a copy of the recipe. Like, Oswald invited people to come out to his mill, we have been told, but he refused to give the recipe up to Paul Revere, so Paul stole it. And in fact, in September of 1777, Oswald's mill fell to the British. Oswald could have refused to cooperate with the British, and he didn't. He cooperated. And because of that, the powder mill that in Pennsylvania was producing the most gunpowder, despite all challenges, was producing it for the other side. That was September of 1777. And the story that I'm about to tell you happened in August of that year, August 23rd, 1777.
He was approached by Paul Revere to relinquish a copy of this gunpowder recipe. He refused. So Paul Revere stole it. And then Paul gave a copy of the recipe to my ancestors, George and Eunice. It was, I'm not sure what year, but it was before war broke out, definitely, because it was during the militia training phase when they were preparing. So they did a gunpowder mill instead of a flour mill. Now, their last name was Stocking, so this is known as the Stocking Gunpowder Mill. It was in Glastonbury, Connecticut. This town of Glastonbury, everybody knew what the Stockings were doing. A lot of them helped out on occasion. All of them kept the secret. George and Eunice had a number of children. George and his sons handled the making of the gunpowder. Eunice and the girls handled the logistics, distribution, arranging secure places to do their drops. Their initial clients, Eunice was about my age, late 40s. Their initial clients were the militias. So Eunice knew all of the heads of the local militia and individuals within it, and supplied them with the powder that they needed to train, probably even to feed their families. Well, if you are a government expecting resistance, you take certain steps to try to remove power from those who would strongly oppose you. They were just one step ahead, what can we say? And then, of course, war broke out, and everything that they were doing became that much more important. They were able to protect their mills from discovery. It took a lot of planning to be able to do that. But it most certainly is not the end of the story. What happened was that this is when everything changed. It wasn't just the start of the revolution, it was this specifically. that sparked a very different kind of change. Eunice was dispatched to go arrange the next drop with Washington, a place just outside of Boston. While she was on her way back, this was August 23rd, there was a boom, and she just had this instant instinct. She knew that something had happened. She rode her horse as fast as she could, knowing that this premonition was real and hoping to say goodbye to her family. It is said that she rode her horse to death to do that, and that must have been an additional tragedy, because when she got there, her husband George and her 3 adult sons were all dead. Elisha was spared only because he'd been sent out on an errand just a short while before. There were some other people from the village who were also on site, one of whom survived the explosion long enough to say what had happened. But by all accounts, and strangely on the tombstone itself, says that they died instantly.
Death like an overflowing stream sweeps us away, our life's a dream, an empty tale, a morning flower, cut down and withered in an hour.
Eunice was undaunted. The things that her family had fought for, she wasn't going to leave those things be. They were fighting against slavery. They were fighting against the mistreatment of people. They were fighting against sexism. So she dusted herself off, buried her sons and her husband in the cemetery up the hill, the one outside of town. And she was given money to rebuild.
I'm supposed to record myself saying some things so that my granddaughter can sync them up with the whatever this thing is, video. I'm sure I'll get around to that at some point. But right now, that's not what I feel like doing. I'm supposed to tell my story. But also, that's not what I feel like doing. I feel like complaining because I'm old. They stole something from me. They stole it from me. They stole so much from me. Promised me things. Stole my husband, stole my children. The way they tried to steal from my granddaughter. Despite how incredible the story is, I could find nothing out there. Nothing at all.
Well, where were we? Yeah, so what was I saying? Yes, how I came to meet Eunice. That's the story we should tell. The story that I just told you is all that I knew initially. It's recorded in a brief format that I've seen repeated in many places on the internet, about her premonition, about the explosion, about their deaths. I knew that George, he was a sergeant in the Lexington Alarm, and he and his sons all participated in that. That's noted on their tombstones. I think I saw that, probably on Find a Grave or some site like that. So I knew those things. Not a whole lot about Eunice, except that she kept the powder mill going to the end. And then I thought, well, let me see. There has to be some information out there. I searched our country's archives to find any record. You would think there would be many records, but do you know? Not one single reference to Eunice, the Stocking powder mill, nothing. No reference. Couldn't find anything, even looking under gunpowder, just nothing. Nothing at all. I Googled her name, and what came up was a term paper.
A term paper. Or a thesis paper. Can't remember which.
A sociology dissertation, actually. A dissertation.
It was published online. The student told a ghost story that she grew up hearing in Glastonbury, Connecticut. They called her Wailing Mary. She's one of the white women. Said that she would walk a graveyard in Glastonbury, where she is not buried, by the way. Not the one where she's buried, a different one. And, just wailing for the loss of her husband and 3 adult sons in a gunpowder mill explosion on August 23rd, 1777. They got her name wrong, which was pointed out in the paper. But Mary is kind of like one of those stand-in names for this kind of supernatural story, like a Jane Doe, John Doe sort of thing.
These are the ladies in white that you see on the television shows that are terrifying. Like, she always drags her victim off into the woods and murders them. Yes. So there's a story like that about Eunice. And I read that and I thought, that does not make any sense at all.
The thing that struck me was that 1777 is a far cry from 1795 when she died. So I was curious as to why there would be a story saying that she is wailing in a graveyard. I thought, that can't possibly be true. Must have been a story that some kids came up with. But here's what happened. It was the year that my grandmother died. The day that she died was the day that I realized that ghosts were real.
Anyway, so that Halloween happened to be the Halloween of the supermoon. And also, it was a blue moon. So Samhain, Halloween, was on a blue moon, full moon, supermoon.
It was just before the election.
My friends in the know said, hey, this is a really great night to light a candle for your ancestors. So I lit a candle for my grandmother who had just passed, and I decided to light one more for Eunice Cobb Stocking.
And here I am in my bedroom at our last house, and I took a candle And I lit the candle.
Because I wanted to ask her, if she showed up, I wanted to ask her why she was haunting a graveyard. And not even her own graveyard. Somebody else's graveyard. Along the road in a completely different part of town.
And I said, this candle is for Eunice Cobb Stocking. I'm your granddaughter. I don't know how this works, but if you're listening, I'd like to ask you some questions.
I lit this candle. It's Halloween. My family has gotten together for a game of Animal Crossing, and we are entertaining the small children by playing hide and go seek in the museum, which was a favorite game at that time. And I'm checking out everybody's islands and going, well, I don't know if this candle thing is going to work. Am I supposed to feel her presence? Would I even know? Do I call out to her? So I'm sitting there in this very situation, Animal Crossing situation and everything. And I say, Eunice, are you there? And this was the first time she spoke to me. She said, yes. Yes.
That terrified me. Look, you watch movies, you read books, you watch TV shows, people tell ghost stories around the campfire, but you never expect that that's actually the experience that you're gonna get.
Oh, scary. Very scary. I was like, oh no, what did I do? I unleashed Satan on the world. No, I didn't. But look, I was raised a certain way, so I had some initial fears along those lines. And I was like, oh, hi, Grandma. Can I call you that? Yes. And I showed her who I am, like how I'm related to her. And she had asked why I'd reached out to her. And then I was like, so, Grandma, can I ask you a question? And she said, yes. What do you want?
She found my story and called out to me and told me that there was something. Well, she didn't tell me there was something I could do, but Kitty, no, that's a good hat.
And I said, no, I don't want something from you. I want to know something. And she was curious. The hostility that she'd had started to fade. And I said, are you a ghost? And she said,
well, granddaughter, yes, I have been haunting that graveyard. Because, what can I say? Their ancestors did me wrong. And I'm just still very angry about it. It's not like I hurt them. I just scare them a little. It's fun. What else am I supposed to do? Ooh, is that the cat? Let's get the kitty. Kitty, kitty, kitty.
and I said, well, but Grandma, I heard about what happened to your family, and you rebuilt the mill afterwards, and you kept it going to the end. Like, I don't think you could have done that if you were gonna do this whole ghost thing. Like, that doesn't make sense why you would stay behind and be haunting people. Why are you doing that? And she said, because I'm so angry. And I was like, oh, and I could feel she was very angry, very angry.
Why were you angry, grandmother?
The Constitution.
The Constitution.
And I remembered hearing in my history class, just one history class, just one time, about how angry people were following the passage of the Constitution.
When I heard what they had done.
Those talks were a little too secret. The word getting out was not the full scope of what was happening. And when it finally went around, like, most of the people who fought in that war were disenfranchised. They had more rights before the Revolutionary War than they had after the Constitution passed.
It disenfranchised everyone who'd fought and survived, except for the few who owned land. Most of the young people who'd fought didn't. They didn't own land. What they did made me very angry. Hello, Mr. Baggins. Come here. He's your good kitty. This is a barn cat. He's a fat barn cat. Hey, show everyone your cute fat belly. Oh, I'm playing with fire now, aren't I? Okay.
She had particular individuals that she was fond of haunting.
She did exactly what some of you, I know, have been joking about. The whole haunting the fuck out of your enemies thing. Yeah, she did that.
And I like her style. I mean, why haunt your friends when you can exclusively haunt your enemies? Which is why I like to say, as Obi-Wan did, strike me down and I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. Eunice was so angry. She was so angry at the passage of the Constitution. Her family died for a cause, and it was all for nothing. That's why she was angry.
Yeah, I was angry. But the thing is, I can't pretend to be as angry as I was. Can I, Baggins? Because I'm not angry like that anymore.
Well, that night that she first spoke to me, though, when she said it was all for nothing, I said, Grandma, guess what? They did eventually abolish slavery. And she said they did. Then I said, hey, Grandma, we have a little situation going on here. And she said, what's that? And I said, well, we have these rights, but someone is trying to take them away. And she said, basically, hold my beer. She said, I'll be back.
Yeah, she gave me a different purpose. Instead of going around and and haunting the descendants of the people who wronged me, which was fun, a fun way to pass time, instead of that, I had something more useful to do, which is to reactivate my old networks, my old distribution networks, talk to their descendants and their descendants and their descendants, reach out, make sure that everybody was looking after their children properly, making sure that they helped their lost children come back around to the proper side of things.
That was, not very long before the last election. And what she told me afterwards was, I think I've bought us some time.
Like I said, I understand. It's hard to believe when people say things that go so far beyond what you've been told is true and false.
Make of that what you will. Make of all of this what you will. Some of my family members believe me, some don't. Some of my friends believe me. None of them tell me to my face that they don't. But at this point, most of them do.
My granddaughter would never tell this story. And maybe it's rude of me to share it, but when she visited Glastonbury, she was driving up north through the valleys where many of the battles were fought. I was in the car with her as we drove up those roads, came around the bend, the places where the graveyards were. It was amazing. I looked out the window and I saw all of these soldiers. And they stood along the edge of the highway, and they saluted me as we drove by. They, the dead, acknowledged what the living would not acknowledge. They acknowledged what I'd done for them. They were all people that I knew.
This is wild. Okay, because I'm heading up toward Glastonbury, and there's rivers. I'm crossing the rivers, and I'm listening to the radio, and it's like, I've been walking in the middle of the night. I go walking in my sleep. Yeah, so that song pops into my mind as I'm going to Glastonbury. I live in a fairy town. I swear all of these things are connected. I live in a fairy town. And the ferries that I take to get into the main city are part of the largest ferry system in this country. And Glastonbury is home to the oldest ferry in this country that's still in operation. It's a small one, goes across the river. And that river, the video for that song was filmed in Glastonbury, which I found out that night, and I was like, chills, what are the odds of that random coinky-dink? Because one of the reasons the lyrics came to me is so I can finally find what I've been looking for, because I was trying to find these answers. Now, going back to what answers I was trying to find, I was trying to find the deed when I went to the site in Glastonbury, because apparently I didn't tell this part of the story yet. So what happened in Glastonbury, I go to the park with my friend. First of all, maybe it's just a coincidence, but it was weird because this park was all of a sudden closed. They'd closed it that summer. I asked around, why did they close it? They said that there were people creating a nuisance, like kids or something like that.
And I thought, that seems pretty extreme to close one of your most major parks because you think some kids have been posing a nuisance. But all right. On the map, it said that the one entrance was closed, but not the other. So I thought, well, I'll go to the other entrance. So my friend and I go to the other entrance. There's just some rinky-dink yellow tape up and just a sign that says closed. And it's out in front of a restaurant. Now, when we park the car there, this lady comes out of the restaurant and is like, really like, what you doing here, kind of a thing. But then when I explained that I'd literally flown across the entire country just to go to the site where my ancestors perished in the Stocking powder mill explosion, which she didn't know anything about, despite it being like literally right next to the restaurant, okay? And she's like, well, you know, hoodlums. And I'm like, okay, hoodlums. She's like, well, you know, you could just go over the tape. My kids do it all the time. And I was like, okay, got it. So it says it's closed, but it's not really closed. I go over there and they'd taken out all of the marker signs. None of the marker signs were up. And the next day when I talked to the lady in the museum, she was surprised to hear that they'd taken the marker signs down. Like those had been put up by a different organization. They had no knowledge that the signs had been taken down. This is all neither here nor there. This is just context. So I'm in this weird state, like, this is weird. Maybe I shouldn't be here. My friend and I are wearing sandals and the ground is like silty sandy. It's just very sandy there. But we hiked out to the site. Fortunately, I'd seen so many pictures that I knew exactly what I was looking for. And I was able to find the site and take a few photos. And I didn't take any video. I think I just didn't want to, you know? I didn't want to take video there, just out of respect. But while we were there, Eunice spoke. She said, he gave it to me. And I was like, oh, this is a part of the story we haven't heard before. He gave it to me. Okay, that was interesting. I drove over to the second house that she lived because the building that she'd lived at on the 15 acres that they had for the Stocking powder mill, there was no house there. So at some point she had moved from the powder mill, where I knew she had a mill, like a flour mill after the war. She'd moved into town, closer into town. At some point they had picked up her house, the house of this war hero. Yep. They picked up her house and moved it. They moved it off of the main road. And it's just some random house. It's across the street from a library, actually. And so I felt kind of weird, but I took a couple pictures of that too, just so I had a picture of the house. But while I was taking a picture of the house, she said again, he gave it to me. So the next day, I drive back up to Glastonbury by myself. And that's the day that I heard the river song. At the museum, everything came together for me. One of the volunteers who was there that day just happened to be the woman who would occasionally play my ancestor, Eunice. She'd done so much research, building on research that had already been done by previous women of Glastonbury who have been fighting to keep her memory alive this whole time. She told me that one of her ancestors also perished in the explosion, although he died the next day. This lady who shares a connection with me to that gunpowder mill accident asked me if I wanted to see the documentation that they had on it, which I absolutely did. As I was going through it, I found something very interesting, which was a deed saying that the land, those 15 acres, belonged to George and Eunice. Because what happened is that at some point after the war, Eunice tells me that it was after the Constitution passed. But I cannot prove that. I only have the word of my ancestor, whom I trust, but you might not. Laying that out there. Full honesty, full disclosure. After the explosion that killed my husband and 3 sons, I told people that I was determined to rebuild. And there was an officer who said he would provide the funding so that we could rebuild. He gave the money to me. He gave it to me. And I took it, and I rebuilt the mill. And we continued to run the gunpowder mill until the end of the war. After that, it was a flour mill. That's what we did. We made flour instead. Food instead of weapons. That seemed biblical. You beat your swords into plowshares. Right? That's what we did. But what happened is that the officer in George Washington's army who loaned her the money, whom she says gave her the money, and that's also what the historical account says, that he gave her the money to rebuild the mill, to fund the war, to continue supplying the army with gunpowder. When he did that, he secretly put his name on the deed, but then let her continue to run everything. He stole her business. He stole it from her. Everything. And that, all of the wonderful people of the world, that is why she continues to haunt the other graveyard. Because that's where her enemies are buried. And she wants to catch every single one of them. But she's not doing that anymore. It's too risky, and she has bigger fish to fry. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Yes, I was angry. I was very angry. But I was not always emotional about it. You did not get to be me, Eunice Stocking. You did not get to be me and do what I did without knowing how to get over it. They stole from me. They stole from everyone. All of those young men that I made gunpowder for, supplied them so they could powder their noses with it, apparently. They knew what my family had done. I was the one delivering things. I'd been delivering that powder since before the war. If it hadn't been for us, they wouldn't have had enough powder to train up their militias, would they? I delivered that myself. Me and my sexy little bags of flour in the wagon. Don't mind me, officer. I'm just a little old lady. Sweet Eunice Cobb Stocking. Eunice Stocking. George's wife. You know George. Everybody loves George. Not only did we do that, my husband and sons, they were in the Lexington Alarm. Yes, we were friends with... I really should not brag. I didn't like him too much. But yeah, we were friends with Paul Revere. We were. He is the one that got... I gotta tell the story right. Okay. Early days. Early days planning everything. Because, yeah, I was in the thick of it. I knew from the beginning what was going on. In the know, this woman, like that. Throw away the key. In the beginning, the type of powder that we manufactured was the finest stuff. You just needed a little bit of it to set your rifle off. Whatever word you use for that these days, I don't know. And there was one manufacturer in the north. He was located out of Pennsylvania. I cannot remember that asshole's name. Whatever. We'd determined that we needed to train up the militia, but we knew that if we commandeered too much powder, it would spark the interest of the Redcoats, which we did not want to do. This needed to fly, as you folks would say, under the radar. So, Paul thought, you know what? I'm gonna go up there. I think they knew each other from... Paul might have did something, I don't know. Paul was a silversmith. Maybe it had something to do with that. Maybe it was just that guy came to Boston sometimes and they knew each other from there. I have no idea what the connection is, but Paul goes out to Pennsylvania to ask this man to sell the recipe or hand it over, share it somehow. Pardon me. I'm a disgusting old lady. You can deal with it. Where was I? Yes. So Paul goes to him to ask for the recipe. And he says no. I don't know. Maybe he enjoyed being the only source of the finest gunpowder in the area and all of the money that came from that. Possibly. Don't you think? And so Paul stole it. He just stole the recipe. Look, he was gonna pay him good money for it, and the guy said no, and we needed it. It was that, or we were sunk. Nothing to do. So he stole it. And then, so the guy in Pennsylvania had 1/3, and he didn't know that we were also producing the same powder. But Paul opened a powder mill himself. It wasn't until after the Constitution. The first heartbreak was learning that, I guess not the first. The first was my loss. The second was the passage of the Constitution. Because It disenfranchised everyone who'd fought and survived, except for the few who owned land. Most of the young people who'd fought didn't. They didn't own land. The tale of Eunice Cobb Stocking and her family, the Stocking Powder Mill explosion, when you read it, when you see how many details are in the story, as a folk historian, as a storyteller myself, I know that every single one of those details was selected and chosen and crafted and arranged in just such a way that the story would be powerful enough to be remembered.
The Constitution.
Death like an overflowing stream sweeps us away, our life's a dream, an empty tale, a morning flower, cut down and withered in an hour. Our age to 70 years is set. How short a time, how frail the state, and if to 80 we arrive, we'd rather sigh and groan than live. Teach us, O Lord, how frail is man, and kindly lengthen not the span, till a wise care of piety fit us to die and dwell with thee.
Obi-Wan. Help me, Obi-Wan. Oh dear.